Hello, good evening, everybody, and very warm welcome to today's second session of this webinar series on rethinking vernacular architecture, documentation, and lessons, hosted by ICOMOS India, National Scientific Committee Vernacular Architecture. I am Purva Patil and a conservation architect and a coordinator of ICOMOS India, NSC Vernacular Architecture. I will be the moderator for today's session. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you for this online platform. I am just requesting all of you, please keep your mic off so that there will be no disturbance between the session. And during the session, anytime you can type your question in chat box, we will collect them and address after the session to the presenters. Today's session is on understanding vernacular architecture, typologies through the landscape of Uttarakhand, Northeast India, and Kutch and Rajasthan region. The word vernacular is synonymous to the idea of being native or indigenous. It is about to the different kind of a typologies for the vernacular architecture. So it is rather not just architectural, it is just a architectural movement. So it is different, identify the different region, people, climatic zones, geographical context, and many others cultural things. So over the past years of having a experience, extensive experience, and conducted different studies and with the different regions and geographical context of Indian subcontinents, the regions varied in climatic, topographical, and cultural conditions. The physical, topographical context, climate, flora, fauna, occupation, craftsmanship, lifestyles, culture, and a major parameters which is connected with these vernacular studies. Architect Akshay Verma is looking into the idea is to expand our understanding of a vernacular build form towards specific rather than the generics it has been referred to as. With this note, now I am welcoming architect Akshay Verma. He has done his graduation from Rachna Sansad Academy of Architecture. After that, he pursued his the second architectural master's degree in urban conservation from Newcastle upon Tyne University, UK in 2011. He is a founder of Windows to Vernacular Architecture. Windows to Vernacular Architecture is a collaborative that is set on exploratory journeys and countrysides and hinterlands of India. Windows to Vernacular is engaged with the local populations, listening to them and learn and to understand their culture, their way of life, their lifestyles, their why they build, how they build. And in this process, the term creates a repository adding to the existing knowledge and pools of the built ecological studies. With this note, now I am welcoming architect Akshay Verma. Please, I am requesting Akshay, start your presentation. Now floor is yours.
Thank you, Purva. Thank you. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Okay. I will just share my screen. Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank ICOMOS India, President Naveen Piplani, and the entire ICOMOS panel, executive panel for giving us this opportunity to present. One second, sorry. So sorry, 1 second. Yes. So to begin with, I would request everyone to take a step back and would request you all to remove any notions of what vernacular could be or would be or is. And let's just try and understand this word vernacular. So etymologically, which is the study of history of words, it's supposed to be native, unique to a specific place, produced without the need of imported components or processes, and possibly built by the individuals who occupy it. Epistemologically, which is the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature and scope of the knowledge, it says that the modern knowledge, as different from and possibly opposite to vernacular knowledge, should be abandoned, as we recognize that vernacular in some instances may in fact be the most modern of the modern. To start with, I would like to share that this entire presentation is a part of a research work which is ongoing, which has been done for the last 6 years. And I will try and express all different aspects. Yes, there are depth in many variations, but I'm going to try and weave it together at the end of the presentation. Also, I will be showcasing a lot of architecture, but we'll try and very carefully use the word or the term vernacular architecture as it has different connotations and imagery associated with it. I might challenge a certain understandings, which we can all take up in the discussions later on. So if I could see the learnings that we had, the practical knowledge, the hands-on work, the building systems that we have learned about with respect to vernacular, I will share these parameters. Like these are basically the critical parameters for us to understand what vernacular is. So if I could start with the first layer, which is the geology, topography, climate, flora, fauna, culture, occupation, scale. Further sieving it, the top 4 become the natural or the ecological parameters, and the bottom 3 are the human parameters. They all end up becoming the built environment. So yes, built environment is a product of all parameters, and all of these define vernacular. I have 4 landscapes to talk through: Kutch, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, Arunachal Pradesh. And if you see, look into all the 4 photographs that are put over here, you will see that the common factor in all these 4 is that the particular imagery or the association, the notion of vernacular that we have in this is basically a direct localized response to all the factors that I mentioned before, all the parameters that I mentioned before. Going into every parameter in a little bit of detail. Geology. In Bhadli, Kutch, we see expanses of outcrops of columnar jointed Mesozoic sandstone. Now, the people over there used it to build the houses, and it was just like a piece on the puzzle. As we saw dry masonry walls, which no longer exist. We come to Jodhpur, the Jodhpur sandstone used to build step wells, and in the process, they build the retaining walls, they build these passages which actually hold the entire structure together, all made of one stone type. The slate in Uttarakhand is layered sedimentary rock, and thus it is used both as a roofing material and as a core building material. In East, contrary to popular belief that it's a heavy rainfall region, we still see a lot of mud structures, simply because the balanced clay content is found there. So if you know the land, you know the resource, you know how to use it to its best application. Topography, a very critical part of any context, any ecosystem. We see in Kutch, Lakhpat at the edge of the sea, at the edge of the creek. It has its own particular response. Very famous Galtaji complex in Rajasthan. The entire structure is built on a 3-tiered water system over there, and the structures literally merge into the adjacent hills. The step land modification seen across the steep hills of Uttarakhand is a very common response, but the people only settled where there was sun. Loktak Lake, famous for its floating masses in Manipur. It's an interesting topography, or rather an ecosystem, if I could say. People build what is called as fumdis, which are basically a mass of vegetation, soil, and organic matter bound together. And people actually live on it. Their entire lifestyle is revolved around the entire floating landmass that they have. Climate response is not a new parameter for us. We see courtyard systems, and we have a lot of study about courtyard systems in our country. The jalis, the small windows that induce the Venturi effect, the jarokhas, the offsetted facades of Rajasthan is a direct climatic response of the region. We see earth-borne structures in the hills, and all of them face towards the south sun. The stilted houses in the east, in the hilly and heavy rainfall and flood-prone regions, is a response to the climatic situations over there. Flora and fauna, rather very a parameter taken for granted, but extremely important, and the depth of knowledge that is there around these is phenomenal. You see, the bungas were a response to the nomadic lifestyle of the people. However, when they settled, the lack of good hardwood in the region, in the grasslands, led them to using the thatch as a perfect response. The local hardwood, which was found in Jaisalmer, was used in the forts, which still supports massive loads and extreme temperatures. In the hills, animals and humans have a very special relationship. Animals live on the lower section of the house, and the body heat warms up the mud floor where the people live, and then the dung collected in the lower section is used for manure or used for fire fuel or used for the maintenance of the house. In East, we see a lot of use of bamboo, and it's like a super material over there. Bamboo, people use it to make houses. They use the bamboo shoots to eat. They cook in hollow bamboo tubes. They weave the mats, they weave their handicrafts, they weave their baskets. So it's like the entire thing revolves around bamboo for them. And there are many such more examples where certain plants which have poisonous saps are used for termite control, where certain saps of certain trees are used for lime plasters, and there's an endless repository of such systems across our country. Culture. Every region has its own cultural understanding that translate into some art form or motif or structural manifestation. I don't really want to delve into religion here. I'm being very clear. I just want to keep it to depiction as of now. So we see intricate mud and mirror lipai work in Kutch. We see frescoes in Shekhawati made of natural pigments. Water is used in the hills to turn prayer wheels in certain parts of the hills. The wood carvings depict the role of the owner of the house or his or her societal status in the tribes in the East. So please bear that there may be many such more examples that are but these are purely depiction of variety rather than these being a classification. Occupation. A very important aspect of why built environment were carved and for what it was given to the occupation of the people. We had dedicated spaces for the looms with a pit in the floor for the craftsmen and weavers in Kutch. Bazaars in fort complexes across Rajasthan. The landscape in the hills are transformed for terrace farming, and accordingly the water is channelized to the upstreams which feed the farms and the people over there. In Manipur, an interesting system that the people over there have is that the families bred fish in the farms, which is called local fish farming over there. And then the same land becomes rice fields and other winter crop is grown over there. So it's not only about the place of work or the house one lives in, it is also the context that becomes a response to the occupation. Finally, skill. The use of material could be similar, but detailing can be so very different. Mud is used to make a mud chula or the lipai in Kutch. The lime arash work, which we see across Rajasthan. Some have even finer detailing and motifs seen across. In the hills, the wood carving easily told us who had what status in the community. And the skill or the application of one material into multiple uses, as seen in East, where bamboo is used in a form of mats for the walls or structural members and for roofing as well. So if I could summarize, I would like to say that all these parameters basically become the building blocks of vernacular. And this learning is based on an important term that we quite often use, which is called as wisdom. So thus, I would like to state, quote unquote, that vernacular is not a style, it's rather a process. So coming to typologies from understanding these parameters, I'm choosing these terms very carefully against all criticism. However, for the lack of better words, they are the best way to showcase what factually exists. Yes, there are many a degree in variations. However, this theory is evolving and keeps modifying. Also, it serves as a base to break away from the stereotypical imagery. So the typologies that I will be explaining in a bit will be domestic, mercantile, royalty, public buildings. Interestingly, mercantile, royalty, public buildings, all are monuments, are termed as monuments and hence are protected. But if you actually look at it, I would like to say that these are basically a software and a hardware upgrade of the domestic type. Let me see if I can explain this through my examples. Understanding the domestic. Now, This is a typology which is with basic resources, primary occupation. These structures, they cannot be looked at as independent elements. They are the evolution of the culture of the people of the land. They live in harmony with the ecology. They have settled where the land has enough sun, there's access to water, farmlands, resources to build, eat, and thus what survived lasted for hundreds of years. Similarly, in the middle of the desert, one wonders, but there's a topographical depression which brings in water, which provides the mud to build the houses, and the material use and the planning is a perfect response to the climate and the context over there. In the upper reaches of the Himalayas, accessibility to stone and timber allows them to build structures that respond to that particular climate, the earthquake prone zones over there. And more importantly, they are well adapted and planned for the snowy winters, which lock them totally. Thus, they have space for the animals, they have space for their storage. So it's a complete response to what happens in that particular ecosystem. And finally, where people didn't find good quality building stone, wattle and daub was always the answer that served all these parameters very well. Mercantile typology. Unfortunately, our study region, Rajasthan, is the only place where we could showcase this typology because it's an important part of the trade route. However, one sees such example across South India, West Bengal, Gujarat, and many a part of the former princely states. These structures served as work and live spaces for many communities. It showcased the wealth, it showcased the resources, it showcased the hierarchical status in the society. However, what is common is all the basic parameters, which I have explained. Material use is of the region, bearing a few which could be bought from outside. However, the materials showcase intricate craftsmanship. There is planning, there's different scales of planning, multiple courtyards, multiple terraces, verandas, similar elements which you see in the domestic side typology as well. Where one could not find stone to carve intricate details, frescoes were shown to express art. Heavily detailed art form, stories were showcased in these frescoes, which are made in natural pigments over lime plaster. And finally, every region brought in with its own level of detailing, with the type of material available, with the type of motifs, with the type of culture, it brought in the own level of detailing. The most obvious and the most studied research of all typologies are these structures of royalty. Well, they had the resources, they had the best craftsmen, they had a different scale altogether. The same material palette, stone, mud, brick, lime, wood, superior or highly engineered craftsmanship, and still we have such palaces sitting in the middle of a water body. We have forts with 15 to 20-meter high walls at the edge of the hills that house markets, various palaces, tables, water systems, and are designed to sustain a siege. They all again respond to the parameters as mentioned before. This is an interesting part of a fort complex in Manipur, where we generally associate the east with bamboo, but here we have heavy customized cylindrical bricks used for the columns. This palace had originally had an concealed rainwater downtake pipe system. Again, the same basic building blocks. This is one of my favorite complexes, Sursagar in Jodhpur. At the top of it, it looks like looks like a 3-4 structures placed together. However, it has a very interesting water system where the water is lifted, and with gravity, these fountains work, and the excess water eventually goes under the structure through some aqueducts and into the fields behind. It's something like an extreme engineering process which was done over there. Now I'm going to be very careful while I'm going to talk about public buildings. I don't want to dwell into the religious build form because that in itself is a very deep and a very vast topic. So I'll try and stay out of it. This is a stepwell, a Baudi, which again, I'm going to use similar building blocks, but it is a response to the water situation of the region. Plus it has various spatial spaces that you can see on the upper layers, lower layers, which were crafted for that particular region. And yes, this is a subterranean structure, completely handcrafted. One of my favorite watermill complexes you see dotted across the hills. They use an existing stream, divert the water, which churns the stone, which grounds their grain, and the people get flour, which is staple food of that region. Trade routes across are dotted with dharamshalas. These dharamshalas or sarais, they had stables, they had places for people to stay the night, they had water resource in form of a step well or a well which served the traveler and the animals. And finally, very carefully, but again, it is a monastery, but at the same time, it's basically a complex of schools, classrooms, place to worship, a place to stay. So if I could club all these parameters, and if I could figure out if I can remove the common parameters, the geology, topography, climate, and flora, fauna. So in a region, if these are common, it's the human factor that becomes a derivative for these typologies. Across the regions, we have seen the variations in the scale or the building type or what the building function is because of what man wanted. But he always responded to what the context and the nature gave it to him. Thus, I would like to restructure my previous diagram, and I would form it into a pyramid where, yes, the built environment sits on top, but if you remove all other parameters from below, the built environment fails. So thus the interest, hence when I say that when I talk about vernacular being a process and not a style, is because it has to include all these parameters. To summarize the entire understanding of parameters and why the typologies and the vast variations of typologies that we have, at that time people didn't have a technical degree of being an architect, but then yes, they were always master craftsmen, master builders. There were scriptures written for planning, there were scriptures written for learning how to build with the context, with the ecosystem. In 2020, yes, we may call this as architecture without architects, but the question is it really? So if I could summarize my learnings, there are knowledge systems which are not confined to just designing a built form or a space. It is the wisdom that is important to learn, the wisdom of the land, the wisdom of ecology, culture, resource management that stands tall at the end of the day. Massive forts still till date have excellent rainwater harvesting systems. Knowledge of aquifers to know where to dig a well or a step well. Houses showcased excellent planning and efficient space utilization. It's very easy to find an association or imagery to vernacular, but really it is this wisdom that is the key for vernacular. And the best part is that it has ever only evolved. In many ways, it lives so long, so far, simply because it's adaptable and it's evolving. There are a lot of buildings there existing which we can re-engineer, but what are we really losing out is the knowledge system, the craftsmanship, the skillsmen, and it's becoming a niche art form. So we have to preserve these systems, gauge the spectrum of possibilities in our current contemporary times. There are architects like Hassan Fatih, Jeffrey Bawa, Laurie Baker, Didi Contractor, and many such who have showcased how one learns from the wisdom of vernacular, which in essence is the process and not the image, thus rendering it not a style but an understanding, a way of life which is sensible and sensitive. So in the end, if I can club all of this and actually want to talk about vernacular architecture, I would quote Paul Oliver, when he says that a vernacular architecture is basically the collective wisdom and the experience of a society, or it is the ways of living that the culture has produced them. Thank you. I would like to show a small video which kind of showcases all these parameters and all these factors. If you could just give me a minute. Thank you, Priya. You may, I don't know if I overstepped the time limit or not. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, Akshay, thank you so much for such an interesting four regions on this platform, and we are thankful for this. Some questions we have, I'll just address them to you. So, from Raj Sundar, there is a question: are you following the traditional route without any modifications, or some engineerings in it? It is based on the strength, etc. So, of the local, what is the availability of a local materials?
Uh, okay. To be honest, you really can't use the existing traditional knowledge system if you want to apply it to the context that we are today. So you have to constantly keep applying science to it, experimenting. I could give a very small example, like in one of our projects in one of our experiments in the Northeast, we were studying the mud structures, and we used fish scale, the waste fish scale oil to actually use to do the last layer of mud plaster, which actually became a water repellent feature. So yes, you have to constantly modifying, adapting, and evolving it. You cannot use what was there.
Okay. One question is from Shreyamai Fadnis. He is asking that what are the challenges you faced, like natural or human challenge, while making, like working across these four regions, especially availability of materials, craftsmanships, and local support.
Yes, the biggest challenge is to get local support. It is, especially when you go to regions where you don't know the language, you have to really be there for days, probably months, to get the confidence, live with them, learn with them, and then get the knowledge. So the biggest challenge is language, if I can say. Other is most of the time, like some of our studies in Arunachal, we really had to go extreme into the interiors, and sometimes it does become a bit difficult to reach there without any internet, with no context. So the hit and trial is the biggest challenge. You can reach there, get nothing, or you can plan everything and still get nothing.
Okay. One Pranay is asking, so by far one of the best understanding of no, he is not asking. He is just saying that by far one of the understanding of vernacular architecture I came across. The next question is from
Thank you so
Prince.
much. Thank you so much.
What is the way of begin learning about vernacular architecture for someone who doesn't know anything about it?
We still, as a country, are blessed with more than around 70% of rural landscape and a lot of monuments or heritage structures, what we call today. You just need to go there, find every village has a mason, ask him, see how he works, go into the seasons when they repair. Like especially, we learned a lot during the monsoons when people repair their houses. That's when the houses come down. That's when they do a lot of work. So we just have to just get out. I mean, like I mentioned, it's so complex. It's not even a part of our educational system. So we have to get out and learn on our own.
Then next question is, where can I learn and hands-on practice of mud houses technology of Garhwal region? Where will find in Garhwal region?
In Garhwal region, uh, to learn about, well, well, to be very honest, see, I will be very frank over here. There is no such place where you can learn about certain things. You can learn a lot about mud somewhere. You need to learn about the different parameters. If you know the mud, what component of mud works how, you can apply it depending on what context you are in. So yes, in Gadwal, if you go, there are certain villages, there are certain practices that do work over there with the natural technologies or modified adaptive natural technologies, and you can definitely pick up from there. One of the places is Dharmalia but that's in Himachal. but the core understanding is similar.
Okay. Thank you, Akshay. The next question is from Jatin Ambani, sir. He is asking that can you discuss any particular project of yours as a case study?
A particular project, yes. There are a few projects which is, we are more of a researcher. We do have a few structures, but we do a lot of research, and we are right now developing materials for a particular project. It's a big document of the entire experiment that we had done to form certain material typologies for different scales of building in Jaipur. So I could definitely email it to him and share it with him. But yes,
Okay.
we are more into the research and collection of the knowledge systems and experimenting as of now.
Okay. Next question is Shilpa is asking, do you conduct any workshops to learn or train these craftsmanships?
We learn with the craftsmen. So whenever we are learning next, you can join. The thing about workshop is there are institutes that do these. We are not an institute.
Your
We
voice
are.
is not coming, Akshay.
Hello. Yeah. So we are
No,
not a. Can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear
there is
you.
a disturbance. Something is wrong.
Okay. So regarding workshops, we don't conduct workshops, but yes, you can definitely join us on any of our.
You are not audible, Akshay.
Am I not audible? Hello. Hello.
Yeah, we
Am I
can hear
audible?
you. Yeah,
Okay.
Audible, yeah.
So,
Audible.
so,
audible.
so what I was saying was that we don't conduct workshops, but we do a lot of research. So you can just tag along with us whenever we are out for our next research. But yes, you will have to stay in some of the countrysides for like a few months.
Okay. Uh, Manal Zia is asking, I want to learn more about the Northeast architecture, especially Tripura. Where can I start? And any books or articles which you can refer, which you can give just reference to her.
Honestly, if I knew books where we could start from, I wouldn't have traveled or researched so much. There is a lot. You really have to go to the ground, on the ground, be on the ground and learn from that. There is no other way about it. So it's the harsh reality. I mean, like for example, we do know a lot of, there will be a few texts, but then not comprehensive enough to show you the real picture, because Tripura itself has got multiple layers. It's got the flatlands, it's got the delta, it's got the hilly regions, it's got the cultivation, the nomadic cultivation culture that is there. So there's so many layers. You have to really be there.
Okay. Thank you, Akshay. And the next question is that is there a way in which vernacular learnings or methods can be combined with the modern technological developments?
Absolutely, why not? We have so many institutes, so many organizations doing it. Auroville, as for one, is doing. There is long back, not long back, like if you see in the entire cold desert, people work a lot with rammed earth, which now scientifically has advanced so ahead that today you can actually, not in India yet, but in Europe, you can actually purchase a panel of rammed earth wall and just install it in your building. So yes, there is, I mean, it's a matter of tweaking, using the professional knowledge that we have, the skill we have, and the building traditional knowledge system that are there, tweaking it and formulating a new, it's like an adaptive algorithm, if I could say. There's no fixed formula. I mean, depends on the challenge. Like I read someone
Right.
about fire resistance being a hindrance.
Yeah.
I really don't think so. I mean, like it if you break it down to the building blocks, even in the hills, everyone had timber roofs. The smoke actually made sure the timber didn't have any termites. Now, a fire hazard resulting because of what? If that is identified, then you can actually tackle the fire hazard problem.
Okay. Tapan is asking, has modern lifestyle moved so far away from traditional ways that now vernacular techniques are only decorative in modern design?
Well, I think that's a question which we all need to ask ourselves, like
Yeah. Yeah, actually.
how far have we moved, and how much we are still clinging to our traditional ways. how much we want the vernacular ways. I mean, like if I could take a very simple example of the pandemic that is happening, I think a lot of people are running to the Ayush ministry, for localized, solutions. So, I mean, how to use it, whether to copy it, whether to copy paste without understanding or learning the essence and then using it. That's more important. So maybe we have moved, we want to move also. There's no one who can stop aspirations. But, if I could take the clock 100 years back, the guy who was living in the mud house in Rajasthan, he,
Please keep your mic off.
the people in Rajasthan also at some point saw a very modern fort coming up apparently in the modern lifestyle of a settler if there were nomads then. So it's very relative. Like what is modern today, tomorrow could be obsolete, and what is traditional yesterday could be the new modern. So we don't know, but it's a personal choice. Can't
Yeah.
really force it.
So next is that since it just has been said that vernacular is largely contextual, is it even okay to try to assimilate it with the contemporary architecture since the context has changed?
Yes, I mean like contemporary architecture. If of whatever little knowledge, if I could share, contemporary architecture. What are the parameters of contemporary architecture? So if you're looking at contemporary architecture in terms of an aesthetic, I don't see why we cannot ground it to the context. If it's about contemporary architecture with respect to the people, the lifestyle, then that's a debate of a different platform altogether. But yes, like uh, contemporary is a time-based word, if I can use. I do not want to say that vernacular is of the past. I do not want to say contemporary is of today. I am looking at vernacular as the system, the process, which can at any time, or because it's been there for so long, why do we have to put a time frame to it? So yes, we can do contemporary work with vernacular knowledge systems. Why not? Who stops it? There are so many people doing it, like not the first people to understand.
Then what does vernacular architecture has to do with Indian cities? Like where is it's hard to source materials and craftsmanships?
It's not, to be honest, it's not hard to source materials, but yes, it is very hard to source craftsmanship. Skilled craftsmanship is a totally different ballgame altogether. But at the same time, sourcing of materials has to be done by understanding the where you're building it. Okay, like for example, in one of our projects, our our entire project built area is a radius of 10 kilometers. So I might not get something on my site which is probably 80 feet by 80 feet. But if I can balance something, if I can go into my ecosystem, I have to understand my ecosystem, create the balance. So resource management becomes really important. And a part of resource management is skill. So you might not have a skillsman, a craftsman, you have to train him, you have to develop it. For that, you have to know it first. So the
Right.
fight is there. That is what we are losing. The knowledge system is something that
Exactly.
we are trying to hunt and we're trying to find. People know a lot of senior architects do know a lot of systems. There are a few books written by people, by Europeans about work done in India. We are still trying to find these systems. So we're just experimenting and figuring.
Yes. That same there is a same person is asking that how can we approach vernacular architecture in South Indian cities and how can we take it further and deliver it to the people in right essence?
I think South India is one of the best resources of vernacular wisdom. So many architects have worked over there. So many people still work in the similar context, similar
Yes.
essence. So, I mean, just go to wherever you want to go. Start, say, if you want to start from Chettinad region, start from there, spread across. You will get everything over there. Right from how the tile is made, right from how the lime is made, from the seashells, every process is there. And I mean, it's just beautiful that it's a lot of it is there even today. And a lot of architects over there are very sensitive and respond very carefully to that even till date.
Yeah. The Pranay is asking Would the factor of a time also be considered when we speak about vernacular architecture? And as a vernacular changes with the time, a vernacular of a city is quite different and has evolved. Do you think the definition should be then rethought since probably
Uh, I don't know where it is taught, but I never learned it. But yes,
actually
the
we never
definition,
learn?
we never learned it. The definition, see, that's the thing. It's an adaptive thing. The definition has to change. I cannot say. I personally cannot say that this is something vernacular. It's always, it is, even as architects, we do sometimes have come across questions from clients where they say, what is the time frame of this building? And so for what time are we designing for? And then when we have to look at structures which lasted a lot longer, we then go and tag these buildings as vernacular. The thing about, I mean, what I could also read through the question is that it's not really the stereo image of vernacular being a house or a hut. There are so many more layers to it. There are so many more processes to it.
Yeah.
So yes, at every point we have to keep redefining this definition. It will change 10 years down the line for sure.
Yes. And then Aditya is asking that what process do you involve in your research execution to document the vernacular systems?
The research, uh, 95% of it is on ground. The 5% is how to book the train ticket to reach over there, where to live over there, which dharamshala to find. Rest everything, you go on site, you do your pilot studies, you make local contacts, you link up with local bodies, local agencies who work over there. You meet people who build houses over there. You learn the community. You live with the community. You spend a lot of time. You got to really spend like 4, 5, 6 months for them to even understand that who you are, what are you doing, why are you doing. Otherwise, most of the time we are thrown out thinking we are from the government and we want to develop this area, because for them development is demolish and build something different. So you really have to like sit down there and work with these people, work your way around.
Okay. The next is how do you approach locals for any project? Or is there construction emphasizing on the importance of vernacular architecture as nowadays it gets difficult to build their trust as they are not inclined more towards modernity?
See, I think I do really understand this very well, because most of the times we also, to convince certain clients that we will use a certain material in a certain way, does get difficult. But then you just have to try harder, I guess. Like, you have to show them examples. One of the projects we're doing currently in Jammu, which is under construction, we wanted to use stone, but then we didn't want to go to a mine. So, but it took around a year or year and a half, and then we actually waited because there was a highway being built over there, and there was an excess stone that was there. So that we just timed it together. So then because he didn't want to he wanted to be a little bit sensitive, he agreed to that. And then now he sees a lot of the changes, the kind of, I wouldn't say cost effectiveness, but then the kind of system that I employed for passive cooling, or uh, how the planning is done, everything. So they understand, but it does take sometimes time. You have to just be patient. As architects, quite often we want the project to start, get the first advance in, do the design, build it, get out of it in 18 months. But with these processes, that 18 months generally goes to 3 years, 4 years. You got to be patient, because it's a longer process. It's slow. You have to teach. You have to first learn yourself. So, I mean, it's very easily said that, you know what, if you build in mud, it fails in the rain. Material is the problem. Whereas most of the times when you build in cement, it cracks up. Oh no, you know what, you didn't mix it well. Just mix it well. It's a good material. It's that mindset. It's gonna take some time, but it's happening. There are people doing it. So you just have to be at it, I guess.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, Prince Sachadeva is asking that a large part of a today's urban society doesn't want anything that doesn't have lots of glass and modern layerings on the facades. So how can we go and convincing them and with the vernacular is need for the hour?
Okay, I don't suggest, or I don't say that you got to be a purist. You got to be sensible. If you're planning it right,
Yes.
if you are like a very interesting thing which even came up in the lecture yesterday about recycling. That's the thing, like You have to look at a cyclic process while you use materials. No, glass is not bad. You need the sun, you need the heat to come in. But how much glass? Where you want to put the glass? How does it impact? So if you have a in-depth analysis of where you're building, what you're building, and if it is balanced, it's not this is the right way or that is the right way. It has to be a balanced approach. So you don't have to be a purist. You have to just be smart about how much to do what.
Okay, I think this is most important question I feel, because when the question is that when it comes to learning from or for vernacular architecture, how can the traditional wisdom be amalgamated with the general education?
Oh wow. Uh, I think for a very long time, like I think if I hope there are a lot of architects on this panel. For a very long time, we all understand that most of our syllabus is has never evolved, has not evolved. It's just been the same. It's just been a similar curriculum, different module setup. This concept of hands-on has to be a part of it. That's the start. Like for example, I would like to give a very small example. Like in history, we do learn a lot about the story of, say, Taj Mahal. It was built by so and so for so and so. Agreed, accepted, everything is fine, World Heritage Site. But as architects, it is also our responsibility to ask, how was it built for it to last so long? How did the water systems work? What is the construction technology? What is the structural engineering? How is it that the entire optical illusion was achieved? What is the maths behind it? It's there. It's if it's not there on paper or on a book, our skills as architects, we can actually or with the collaboration of geologists, engineers, chemists, and material scientists, you can definitely decipher, re-engineer it. So the if you have to put it in the process of education system, certain things have to tweak. I am not into that sphere. I do not know whether it is possible or no. But then, like how even for you or for even me, having done my master's in urban design, now pursuing vernacular aggressively for the past 10 years, there's no other process. Like you have to do it on your own, or you join a good firm like a Hunarshala or a Will and learn from there. So
Yeah.
I mean, for that, it will be interesting if there's some academician on the panel, and then we can really request him to do this.
Right. Now we'll take last question of this session. Your title says that understanding vernacular typologies through landscape of Uttarakhand, northeast region, Kutch and Rajasthan. So in this term of vernacular, how would you define landscape, be in urban or rural?
I think urban and rural is a very political landscape, political terminology. I really don't want to delve into it, but
So
then
for actually, I want to ask you, like for you, what is landscape in this context?
ecology.
Okay.
So ecology is something which comes with all the layers. You can do a cross section of Earth, if I could say, and then you shift it every 5, 10, 15, 20 kilometers, it changes. You know, so for example, a very simple example, Jaisalmer, in the middle of the Thar, you still find a lot of wells, a lot of interesting water systems across. And if you know the ecology of the area well, if you know what flora and fauna is over there, the people over there, the local people knew where to find water. So in that landscape, I don't know whether it is urban, rural, extremely rural, desert, what. I mean, landscape is a very contemporary word, if I could say, but I would use ecology as a much more broader word, which includes all these factors together.
Okay, I think one more question is coming. Sorry, Akshay.
No
How to
problem.
make vernacular architecture more commercial and preferable to for today's client? I think
How to make it?
actually the word commercial actually should not come in this.
No, it's
It is
okay.
not about the commercial.
Okay. I mean, like, if you can find a way to replace, if you like a very small example, if you can find a way to replace cement with lime. Okay, cement comes from a from limestone. So if you can find a way to just do that one change, I'm not saying, you know what, we cannot build in like we need to build only in stone or only in mud. No, but if we can even use small elements, why can't we have apartments with internal walls which are rammed earth or mud walls? What stops? I don't think anything stops
Yeah.
us. Have we explored? The problem with vernacular, what our country, in our country, is that the materials that qualify under the vernacular are not a part of any code. So how do I suggest? How do I justify? There's a very interesting documentation done, which if somebody can get a hold of, done in Bhutan. They did structural analysis of all rammed earth buildings in Bhutan, and there are technical drawings, there are movement diagrams, there are stress diagrams of it, and they have concluded what is the importance of that material in that context. So I would like, if you again, Mr. Sadai is saying that uh, how to move them back to the roots. I think you have to just show them what advantages you have. You have to do the basic maths, like it may not be cost effective today with respect to the time frame of the construction, but with respect to the life of the building, that is the cost that we need to start talking about. Yes, it costs us 10 rupees more, maybe, or 5 rupees less sometimes, but it lasts us probably 10, 20 times longer.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's up to you how much you
Actually,
believe in
now
it.
what my experience is, sometimes client are saying that you just do lime plaster from outside, or sometimes they are saying just do from inside.
Yeah,
It is depends upon client how they want. Sometimes the client are actually saying that you go for lime plaster. Actually, I experienced this in Pondicherry.
yeah. No, so the thing is, again, you sometimes, even we as individuals, like for a very long time, I didn't know what are the potential of lime like. And then when you suddenly see a palace sitting in the middle of a lake in Rajasthan, and you wonder, how did this thing be built in the middle of a lake, and we are struggling to have watertight tanks in our buildings? And then you try to hunt people who have built that, and then you don't have, and then you're like, okay, where do I find? And you go to certain institutes, you try and test lime in any lab. It's so expensive to test lime, to get the chemical properties of lime sometimes. Because once you know the chemical properties, then you know what additives to add into it, whether it is vegetative, whether it is protein based, whether it is what. So I mean, it sometimes, lack of our knowledge also, from where we come or from what systems we come from, is also a factor into all of this. But yes, nobody can put a lime plaster from outside and a cement plaster and the building works. They both are gonna fall eventually.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think we are covered all these questions. So thank you, Akshay, on the behalf of ICOMOS India and NSC Vernacular Architecture for this wonderful and insightful session.
Thank
It
you
was
so much.
really interesting to know about actually the understanding the term vernacular and the multiple parameters which is connected with the vernacular, and
Thank you
also
so
how
much.
to read vernacular and focusing on the built environment and or architecture. So it is
Yes.
really interesting session. Thank you
Thank
once
you.
again.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Actually, we appreciated you being here for our second session with this vernacular series, and we will see you tomorrow at the same time with our third session on vernacular heritage of culturally rich Indian cities, learning from house forms in Lucknow region by Dr. Ritu Gulati. On behalf of ICOMOS India and NSCVA, thanking you once again. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.